Alright, what's up guys? Nobnoid here. Today's video is gonna be a coding lesson, as you can tell. Um, I've been coding since I was like 8 or something, and I'm in school for computer science, so I figured I should start a coding lesson so you don't have to listen to like some idiot ramble on the internet, and I'll just get straight to the point. So, I'm gonna be teaching you C++. Now, C++ is case sensitive. It's an object-oriented language. You're gonna need a semicolon at the end of each line. So, Python users, uh, tough luck. It's a lower level language, so it doesn't run in a VM like Java or a lot of other higher level languages. But this is also good because it means you're gonna have more versatile deployment. You can write code for embedded systems. Think your microwave, your, uh, I don't know, your calculator, little chips. You can put it on there. You don't need a full-on computer to run this code. Um, it's not hard to learn. C++ kind of has a bad reputation for being hard. Scary pointers, I don't know. But the thing about C++ is once you learn C++, you can pick up any language. Any language. Maybe not assembly, but pretty much any language. Um, where do I code? How do I run my code? How do I set up my IDE? You can code C++ in so many IDEs. It'd be impossible for me to show you how to set up every one, but I recommend Microsoft Visual Studio. Setting it up is pretty straightforward. There's plenty of tutorials on YouTube. I'm not gonna bother setting it up. If you're on Unix, you have tons of options. You can just run it in the like command line, and Unix is like Mac, Linux, stuff like that. Generally, you're gonna be using Clang or GCC as the compiler, though. Even if you're in Visual Studio, when you hit run, it's gonna compile it with that. So, all this sounds complicated. So copy this link. I'm going to put it in the description. Just put it here. You can code online. You don't have to set up an IDE. This is the lazy man's way to code. Uh, this isn't ideal. I recommend setting up Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code, but you don't have to necessarily. To follow this tutorial, you can just plug and play your code here. Okay, so this is a basic C++ program. This is like the most basic thing you can get. We got the include header, namespace, standard, main method, hello world, return 0, and a comment at the top. Do you understand anything I just said? Probably not. So, what are comments? Comments are implemented to pretty much any programming language. Comments are a way of writing text in code that won't be executed. So everything here is purely cosmetic and purely for the coder themselves to read and for anyone who's receiving this code or using this code in the future to read. Um, and the way you can do comments is you can do them this way. So you do a slash and then an asterisk. Um, and then you end the comment by doing an asterisk, right? And then a slash. So something, something. That's one way to do a comment. Another way to do a comment, which is typically how they're done in line, is you do slash slash and then whatever. Okay? So comments are pretty straightforward. They're simple. Don't worry about it. Um, Obviously, these are used to explain your code, write anything there. Uh, you know. Include headers. So any command starting with a hashtag or pound sign, whatever you want to call it, is a preprocessor directive. Um, the preprocessor directives don't require a semicolon at the end of the line. See, there's no semicolon here. This is the preprocessor examines the code before like everything's compiled. I'll explain this in a later tutorial, but basically it's uh, run before that the code is compiled. Um, Include headers are used to include libraries that you might need for your code. Libraries contain standard code that are already defined. There's a lot of basic and useful functions in the C++ standard template library, also known as the STL. Um, IOStream is part of the STL. Include IOStream includes the IOStream header file, and this includes things like cin, cout. This is used for printing to the console. Um, Now, you'll notice these are inside of angled brackets. Now, this is pretty much for including anything that you didn't make yourself, or like you don't have the direct file for. So this is like uh, STL, anything like that. You put it in quotes though when you have your own file in your directory. So say you coded your own HPP file, you're gonna use these. And if you're a little bit confused, I'll explain all this more in depth in future tutorials, and you'll start to piece it together a bit more. So namespace. To avoid collision, also known as like you have two functions that are named the same thing, we put STL functions in the standard namespace. So that's what you see here. So we're using the standard namespace. Generally, you don't want to do this though, because it's just not good practice. Um, but the way that we do this is we can do using namespace std, and this means that we're going to be using this namespace throughout all the code in the rest of the file. Then we can do using std, and then these two like colons is the scope resolution operator. And then scope is where code can/cannot be accessed. Um, and then we can also directly resolve the scope without using any using statements. So like we can just do std, and which is the namespace, colon, which is scope resolution. So we're resolving the scope to std and then cout. So instead of this, if we delete this, this code will not work because cout, it, it doesn't know where this is because we haven't defined the namespace. And in here, the namespace is std, where this function is. So we have to define this as std cout. And now the code works again. Um, we're gonna explain this a little bit more in depth. I'm just trying to give you the basics so that you understand the basic Hello World code. Also, we're gonna go into functions now. So you're gonna notice that this is the int main, and then we have just some parentheses, and then some angled or some squiggly brackets, and then code in here. So this is the main method, main function, whatever you want to call it. This is going to be executed when you run the program, and this is where you put all the code you want to be executed when you run the program. Main is a function slash method. You can define your own functions and methods if you want. Methods work as such. So here's the return value, the name of the method, and then here you can have data types and the name of the data type. So the main method, you can take in command line arguments, but the main method's special, so you can't just put anything there. You either take in nothing or you take in command line arguments. We're going to explain this more in depth later, but like I said, this is the basic layout of a function. So you're going to have the returning data type. In the case of main method, it's an integer because you can return different numbers for error codes and stuff like that. You are not required to return anything in the main method. So if I take this out, it'll work exactly the same. if at any point a method return, if at any point a method returns, the method stops running immediately after the return statement. So say I put return right here, the code does nothing because we returned before we printed. So yeah, that's how that works. And return 0, it just tells the main to stop running, and return 0 is the exit code. Cin and cout. Cout is an object, basically a complex data type defined in the IO stream header. Cout can be used to print to the console via the insertion operator, which is these two angled brackets right here. The insertion operator you can think of as like an arrow pointing towards the IO stream. So think of it as you're passing this string into cout because it's pointing there. Like, see, it's an arrow. Look at that. Likewise, cin can be used to allow the user to enter things into the console and for the program to extract these things. This requires the use of the extraction operator, which is just an arrow pointing the other way, basically. So this is example code of how to take in an integer I from the console. So like I said, think of it as an arrow. Endl, which is n short for end line, inserts an end line character or an enter essentially, and this is needed to print to another line. For example, if I did cout hello world and then cout and then put another insertion operator, sorry, and did hello world, it would print hello world on the same line without a space. However, if I did cout hello world endl hello world, it will print hello world new line hello world. Okay, we're gonna go to the next slide. Variables and primitive data types. Variables are arguably the most important concept in programming. Variables hold data. Variables can be changed at any point unless constant. Primitive data types are the most basic data types and are predefined in a language. The primitive data types in C++ are integers, characters, booleans, floating points, double floating points, and void. The main ones we're going to be paying attention to are integers, characters, booleans, and doubles. I mean, floats, I guess, too, but, you know. All of these have a keyword. Integers, characters. Integers are int, characters are char. Booleans are bool. Floats are, well, float. Doubles are double. And void is void. You can create a variable as such, keyword, and then the name of the variable. And this is called variable declaration. This does not initialize the variable. It doesn't contain anything. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, name of variable equals something. So the right-hand side will be assigned to the variable. So say we had an int called I, and then we had I equals 2. It would set the value of I to 2. Okay, well, this seems a little annoying if we had to do this every time. So we can also just do it in one line. So we can do keyword name of variable equals value. And we can also declare multiple variables of the same type on the same line using commas. So say we had integer I, y, z, or something. It would declare 3 variables. Okay, so we're going to go to the next slide. Variables can be made constant, which means unchangeable past their initial value. So like say you wanted to create pi, you're not going to be changing the value of pi because it's a constant in math. So you do const before the keyword and then double the keyword. The name of the variable pi, this could be anything. You can name it anything. You could name it pi, cool, equals 3.1415 or something. And then you cannot do this later on. Well, this is needs to be that. But you can't do this later on because we made it a constant, so you can't give it a new value. Now, variables are typically named in camel case. So the first word starts with a lowercase, and then the start of every next word starts in an uppercase. And this is most readable, very nice. It looks nice. You can't have spaces in variable names, so you might as well do it this way. You can do upper camel case. This is lower camel case. It just depends which one you start the first letter with. But, you know, this is typically how it's done. Const variables are typically defined in all caps with underscores in between the words. So nuclear launch code equals 123, and we have a comment there for good measure. To tie it all together, we're going to write a program that outputs hello world to the console using a constant variable instead of a string literal. So a string literal is just a string in quotation marks like this used right here. And we're going to do this using a variable instead of that. Then we're going to make the program ask the user for their name and have the program greet the user using their inputted name. So, I encourage you to try this yourself before I do it for you. But if not, if you don't feel like you can do it, just feel free to watch. And we're just gonna use namespace as TD. It's not the way you should do it, but for our purposes, it's good enough. Because, you know. So we're just gonna have a variable string, and we're gonna name it output equals hello world, and then we're gonna do cout output and so what we did here, we create a string named output, and we set its value equal to hello world. And then we have the cout object, and we're pushing the output variable. Think of this as an arrow pointing towards this object. So we're pushing output, which is equivalent to hello world, to the console. And then we're also going to push an end line character to the console. So that's all this does. It's really simple. And then we're going to make the program ask the user for the name and have the program greet the user. So how do we do this? We're going to have to use cin. So we're going to create another string called name. Alright. And if at any point you want to run your code, you can just hit run at the top here and see it works. So we're going to do cin, and then remember, think of this as an arrow. So we're taking cin and pushing it into the string called name. So that's it. And then we want it to output like hello, then their name. So we're going to do another cout. And then we can put a string literal saying hello, comma, and then we're going to push the user's name to cout, and then we're going to say an exclamation mark at the end, and boom. Now, well, this obviously doesn't ask the user for the name, but but you could do that. But I can just type my name in here. My name's Matthew. So we're gonna put that in. And then it says, hello, Matthew. Right? Isn't that nice? But we could even put something here like, see out, what is your name? Put a comment here for good measure. See, I forgot to put an endline character. So it's gonna make me type here instead of on the next line. So if I put an endline character here, it makes me type on the next line. Alright, so that's about it. I'm gonna give you a challenge for your homework. Create a program that asks the user to input two numbers. The program then adds the two numbers and outputs the result. Now, coding is often about trying different approaches until one works. There are many different ways to code anything. So don't be worried about coding it a very specific way. Just get it to work. I just want you to code something that looks exactly like this. So it puts out, enter the first number, colon, and then you enter a number, you enter another number, and then it outputs the sum. So it's a very basic calculator. This is very basic. Um, but don't get upset if you have problems with it. Just keep trying it until it works. You might have to Google something, you might have to watch this video again, you might have to, research, but that's just part of coding. You're never gonna know everything, so you gotta do research. So I hope you try this, and in the next video I will show you how to do this and give you more in-depth lessons of how to code in C++. So, best of luck, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.